The thing I would like to remind people is it's okay to burn hot. It's okay to burn fast. You don't have to burn out. That's a choice.
All right, here we go. Robyn, so good to see you again. We had a pretty killer conversation the other day, and I wanted to bring you on the podcast to share your experience with other people, of course. So if you've seen any of the previous episodes, if you listen in, you know that I try to highlight to my guests who my guests are, what they do, and how they can help. And so with all of that, let's get right into your story. Who are you?
So do you want me to start with the background, like how I got here? Because it's a crazy story.
I know you have a crazy story to tell. Why don't we start with the basics? Who are you? What do you do? And then we'll get into the background.
All right. So I am Dr. Robyn Odegaard. Dr. Robyn, more formally, also known aka Mental MacGyver. And I do high performance business psychology and professional confidant work. So I work with founders, funders, executives, professionals, celebrities, athletes, those very high powered people who often find themselves in places that are intellectually lonely and professionally isolating. And they realize that a regular therapist who has no business acumen asking them a question like, well, I don't know, what do you think you should do, isn't particularly helpful. And so my clients are very mobile, very global. I often start my day talking to people in Europe or the UK, and we'll end it talking to somebody in California or Hawaii.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You know, the interesting thing there that you had mentioned is similar to my experience. My last name is sometimes difficult to pronounce as well, and so I usually go by Dr. Felix myself. So,
Right.
which is totally fine, totally cool. I still feel a little uneasy sometimes about having that doctor title bestowed upon me. So,
Really?
Dr. Felix works just fine for me. But tell me more about your therapy background, how you got to be Dr. Robyn, because you have an interesting tidbit there that goes along with that.
Yeah. So I did not get to go to college until I was 32. So I have a backstory that starts out growing up in a cult, being married off, getting out of that marriage, and we can get into the details if you want. Getting out of that marriage because the cartel my husband was involved with didn't like me. Fortunately for me, they convinced him he'd be better off without me. So they didn't get rid of me in a messy way. They just had him kick me out, which was really good. Then I played some competitive beach volleyball. And then I got married for a second time, my own fault. Married a narcissistic, closeted bisexual. 0 out of 5 stars for that. Do not recommend. And he moved me to Long Island and then took a job in London, England. And what he said to me was, we don't need your silly money anyway. As long as you're available to host wine tastings and dinner parties and do your executive arm candy wife job, I don't care what you do. Why don't you just go to college? And that was my opportunity at 32. And I got 3 degrees in 6 years.
Wow. Now, you mentioned a lot of big things, and I know everybody will want to hear about the competitive beach volleyball. But
Yes.
of course, I'm more interested in the other words that you mentioned, which are cult and cartel. Most of my guests have not, or so far, I would say none of my guests have come or at least shared coming from a cult and being involved with a cartel. So we'll leave the competitive beach volleyball for maybe a little bit later down the road. But tell us a little bit more, if you can, about this upbringing in a cult and the cartel and how that really shaped your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't know I had grown up in a cartel until I actually went to college and started studying things. And then I was like, hold on a minute. Wait, I grew up in a cartel. Who knew? Yeah, I grew up in a cult. Who knew? I had no idea. And the thing was, if there's a book out there called The Well-Trained Wife, and if you want to know what it's like to like grow up in a cartel and kind of be brainwashed in that space, that's a great book, The Well-Trained Wife. And so when I was a teenager and my dad met my husband, who was my first cousin, so he kind of knew him, and he said to me, he asked for your hand in marriage, and I said yes. I didn't even realize like I was dating him. I was just answering the phone when he called because I lived in California. He lived in Charlotte. And so I remember between my junior and senior year in high school, my dad said, he asked for your hand in marriage. And I said yes. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, I guess that's what I'm doing then. Like it never occurred to me to say, time out, hold on. That's not what I want to do with my life. Like it just never occurred to me. And so my senior year in high school, I went to school, I worked part-time, I saved money, I paid for my own wedding. And 3 weeks after I graduated high school, I got married and was moved 3,000 miles away from home.
Wild.
But I got to North Carolina and I very quickly learned three things about my new husband. One, he was not very bright. Two, he was very badly in debt. And three, he had a drug problem. But
Mm.
those three things ended up being silver linings. So because he wasn't very bright, he couldn't maintain the grooming that had been put in place about you're a woman, you're not very smart, you're too emotional to make decisions, like you need a man to put a roof over your head. Like he couldn't hold water to that because I was just smarter than he was. Because he was badly in debt, he needed me to get a job. And married women in my family don't work outside the home, so that was a big deal. And that helped me recognize, hold on a minute, I can earn money myself. Like I don't need a man to necessarily feed me. But I stayed because the last thing my dad said to me before I walked down the aisle was, you're no longer welcome in my home as a single woman. So I had nowhere to go, so I stayed. But 8.5 years later, my husband threw me out. He told my dad it was because I was lazy. My dad called and gave me the riot act. He told me I was bringing shame on the family and that if I had been appropriately submissive, I would have been able to make it work. What I found out later, my ex-husband at that point, he came back several years later and wanted to try again. And I said, the last thing you said to me was, I don't love you, I don't want to be married to you, and I don't want you living in my house. Never mind that that house was a slab of concrete, plywood walls, and a tin roof. I had to cut the grass in the bedroom because it was growing under the wall.
Wild.
So I was living in basically a shack. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you didn't love me. I don't understand. Why would you want to try again? I thought that was hysterical. And he said, well, let me tell you what actually happened. I'm all ears. What actually happened? It turned out, so he started naming names, people I knew, people I remembered. They were part of a cocaine ring, which, I mean, I knew they were into drugs. I had been in parties where there were lines of cocaine on the table, never did any. I was never interested, but lines of cocaine. So I knew like they were into drugs. I didn't realize that they were like a cocaine ring. I also didn't realize that they were part of a cartel. And the cartel realized that my husband had really good credit. Thank you, Robyn, for fixing my credit. And they wanted to steal his identity, which they did do. He almost ended up in federal prison. But they knew that I did our family finances and that they apparently realized I was a reasonably intelligent human being and that I was going to be a problem. And so they needed me out of the way. And they convinced him that I was holding him back, that he could do better than me and he should get rid of me. And that's why he threw me out. So if I ever write that book, it's going to be called I'd Like to Thank the Cartel.
That's a wonderful title. I have to say that is the craziest story I have ever heard. Uh, and one of the questions I had too was, as an outsider looking at people in cults, or maybe even cartels, it sometimes is obvious as an outsider what's going on, but the people on the inside are oftentimes either brainwashed or under so much external pressure that they're not able to see that for themselves. So for you, then, it seems like it was the opportunity for you to get out of the house and have a job, which goes against everything you were taught up until that point,
Right.
that started opening those eyes for you.
I took a job because I was being submissive. My husband told me I needed to get a job, so I did.
Interesting. And so how did your dynamics with the rest of your family change as a result? Are you still in contact even with them today? Because that's
Yeah,
oftentimes
I
a
mean,
thing, right?
sort of. So are we close? No. Do I call them with, oh, I have this issue. Oh, I want advice? No. Do they understand what I do for a living? Absolutely not. But I do call my parents on their birthdays. I call them on Mother's and Father's Day. If I'm going out to Vegas for a conference later this year, which is, 45-minute plane ride from where my parents live. I'm going to go to California. I'll stay with my brother, who I am close to my brother, and I'll see my parents. We'll have lunch or something. And as long as I keep the topics close to things that their grandchildren, my dad still raises cattle, things that they're comfortable talking about, we're fine. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about my life. We don't talk about the past, like very superficial. Here's the thing though, my parents did love me. They did the best by me that they knew how to do. It was lousy, but they weren't malicious. They weren't trying to ruin my life. They were actually trying to make sure I didn't starve to death because they fully believed that as a girl child, I couldn't feed myself. And it took me a long time to kind of forgive them, I guess is a good way to say that, to be able to say they did the best they could with the knowledge they have.
So I guess the question I have then is for other people who may be in a similar situation but don't know because they're on the inside and maybe they're brainwashed, their eyes are closed, their ears are shut. How can you make other people aware of the fact that they're maybe not in the most desirable of circumstances? And maybe that's not necessarily a cult or a cartel.
Yeah.
Maybe it's really just whatever circumstances they're in is not the best situation for them.
Well, and sometimes I wonder about that. Is it my responsibility to judge someone else's situation and say it's bad for you?
No, sure,
No. But
sure.
if someone comes to me and they're talking about their situation, or they're complaining about their situation, or they're asking for advice, then that's the opportunity to say that might not be ideal. But I'm not going to go into a cult or a cartel and be like, "Hey, all y'all, this is bad for you." That's not my responsibility.
Yeah. A part of the reason I'm asking is I agree with you. Can't go in and can't tell anybody how to live their lives, right? And when walking up to anybody, whether it's a stranger on the street, your neighbor, or somebody you know a little bit closer, even, um, for the most part, people don't want to hear what you have to say, anyways, right? They want to
Right.
hear their story more than yours. But at the same time, I've come across a lot of people who are screaming for help, right? They're saying, "I need help. I don't like my circumstances. I don't like my job.
Yep.
I don't like this, that, and the other. I don't know what to do. I want someone to tell me." And when you make suggestions to them, they're still not interested. And
Mhm.
I have
Yeah.
to guess it's because it's not what they wanted to hear. But I'm wondering if there's something else from, maybe based on your
Yeah.
experience, if there's something else that goes into that for people to being not just asking for help, but then especially when you're asking, also accepting the help that other people might offer.
Yeah. I guess one caveat I want to add before I answer your question, if I see someone being abused publicly, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, whatever, I will step in. I
Mm,
will say, this is not okay. No, you don't get to treat people that way. And it's gotten me in trouble more than once because people who are abusive will turn their rage on you when you do that. But
sure.
so in that case, I will step in. But to answer your question, I use motivational interviewing. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but
Oh
motivational
yeah.
interviewing comes out of the addiction space. And the idea of it is you can't go to someone and say, "You're broken. Let me fix you. Here's how I fix you." That never
Yeah.
works. You're going to get pushed back. That's the idea of thinking like life is a wrestling match. And if I pin you to the floor, then I win and you have to change. That's not how it works. So the idea of motivational interviewing is instead that life is more like a dance. Let me ask you, what would you like to be different? What might your life look like if it was different? Is that better or worse? How is that better or worse? What makes your current life good? Why do you stay in it? What makes your current life bad? If you imagine a different life, what would make that good? What are you scared of about that life? And that line of questioning, allowing someone to explore the opportunity to change and what change might look like, makes them much more vested in, oh, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could take one little step. Maybe I want that. Whereas so often when we talk to people who are in situations that we perceive as being negative and we want to save them, we try to pull them out of it and they don't want to be saved. It's not what they're looking for and then they're mad.
Yeah.
So invite people to explore change, I find to be a very useful way to help people in situations like that.
That's a very good point. I would say I've had a similar experience with my brother, who was
Mm.
a very much an alcoholic, and he always said, "I know I'm an alcoholic. I need help." But any help that was offered was really just falling on deaf ears, and he had no interest in being helped. And when I tried to go that motivational interviewing route with him, what could life look like? What do you really want to do, right?
Mhm.
The answers really were more along the lines of, well, this is my life. There's nothing that can be changed. I don't see a way out. I don't see a future.
Mhm.
And realizing that for myself for the first time was when I realized that there's no amount of help that anybody can offer him that will ever make a difference.
Yeah, if he's
And I think that's
already into learned helplessness. Yeah.
yes, yes. And I think that's an important point to make for anybody who is looking for help. It's not just That's what I meant earlier by saying it's not just about asking for help. It's also about accepting the help that
Mhm.
someone else might be able to offer. Just because you're asking doesn't mean you're willing and ready to accept that
Mhm.
change, that help, because change is
Yeah.
hard, right? Change is hard at the end of the day,
Yep. That's
and
what I was
and
going to say.
so
They don't want doing the work. Wanting the change and
yes,
doing the work are different things. I want to
right.
be a person who is that, not a, I wouldn't want to be a person who has to do the work to be that.
Yes, very much. But that goes to so many things, right? I mean, even just simple things like weight loss. People always
Mm.
say, "Oh, I want to lose weight," but then you're not willing to do the hard work to actually make that happen, like going to the gym and eating right and figuring out how to eat better, right? All those little
Mm.
things, even it really affects that really affects everyone in some way, shape, or form. I feel like.
Well, if you think about it, I like to think about it this way: the the cause of any situation is in the past. Whatever has happened brought us here to the present. So the cause is in
Mhm.
the past. The solution is in the present. If I want today to be different than yesterday, I need to make choices today that are different than the choices I made today. The problem is the motivation is in the future. Our future self is the motivation. And
Yeah,
humans are not very good at doing things for people we don't know, and we don't
yeah,
know our future self. And so, how to find that motivation of your future self will thank you if you do this and drag it into the present so that we can make a change today to make today different than yesterday so tomorrow can be better is really challenging. And that kind of thought process takes work.
yeah. That's a wonderful analogy. I really love that. That the problem begins in the past, the solution is in the future, but the motivation is the solution is
The solution's
today,
today. Yeah,
but the
motivation's in the
motivation is
future.
in the future.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of a conversation I had with my own therapist today about self love, and I'm wondering if it's that self love component that is necessary in order to connect yourself with that motivating future. Because, like you said, it's about not trusting strangers, not wanting to have, or maybe not trusting, but um, having a hard time connecting with a stranger. And even though that
Mhm.
stranger is yourself, but if you had more self love and more self compassion and more investment in yourself, would that make the motivation from the future self more tenable? Bring that a little closer.
Yeah, potentially. It's sad how often I will ask a client, "Do you think you're lovable?" And they hesitate. They're not sure. Sometimes they even say no. If
Yeah.
you are struggling with feeling lovable, how could you possibly love yourself to do the hard thing today that'll make you better tomorrow?
So how can we ignite that then? How can we get people to be more lovable for about themselves, right? How can we ignite
Yeah.
that self love in people in others, so that because I feel like that's the first step. If you don't have
Mhm.
that love for yourself, you really have no chance at motivating yourself to enact any kind of change.
Yeah. I like to ask clients to kind of split out the voice. What is that head? I'll call it head trash. What is the head trash saying? What is that voice in your head? You're not good enough. You're not worthy. You're not lovable. Whatever words that voice in that head, your head, my voice has a name
Yeah,
so that I can split it. I call her Harriet. Um, so that I can recognize when she comes up and she's like, "Oh, you had a potential client call. You did a terrible job. You said this wrong and that wrong, and you're never going to get another client again." Like I mean, she's horrible. She used to be very anorexic. I struggled with anorexia when I was young because that voice in my head was constantly in my ear about how fat I was. And if we can find a way to help people kind of separate out that negative voice, the part of their brain that hates them, if we can find it, we can have a conversation and be able to say, "Oh, that's not you. That's a part of your brain. Maybe it was built in childhood." I mean, there's lots of places you can go and find it. I'm sure you know that. But if we can separate it out so it's not just, I believe this about myself, there's a part of my brain that believes this, and I get to decide that. I get to say, I always say, "Harriet, you get to come along for the ride. You have to sit in the back seat. You don't get to drive, and you certainly cannot navigate."
yeah, yeah. It's
But
I
noticing
don't.
that head trash, what is it? What is it saying? What is it thinking? What is it feeling? When does it come up? All those kind of things. And then look for the self sabotage that comes on the back of it.
Yeah. But one of the problems I always have with these negative voices inside my head, and there's plenty of them, is I
Mm.
recognize that they're not me. I haven't given them a name. Maybe I should do that.
It's
But I
very useful.
recognize. No, I don't discount that at all. Um, the problem I have is that I don't know what to replace them with. Right. Uh, I, I've had plenty of obviously education as a coach,
Hmm.
life experiences as well.
Hmm.
With all the positive self talk, but that never seems to be enough.
That's because
It's maybe.
positive self-talk feels fake.
Yes, right, exactly. I was about to say that, right? It doesn't seem real. It doesn't feel authentic. So, what can you do about that?
So the issue isn't, oh, you said mean things to me, I'm going to say positive things to me. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand the mean things. Where are they coming from? What happened? What happened? Who said that to you? I know some of my self-talk is from my father. Some of that noise, some of that, my mother, don't try that, you might fail. Like, I know that. Where does it come from? That's not me. I don't have to argue with it. I just have to notice, oh, that part of my brain believes that right now. Is that true?
Mm.
What does the evidence say? And sometimes it can come up with evidence. Like, if I flub a potential client and I don't get that client, they're really loud. You didn't get that client. You suck. You're never you. Why are you in business? Like, I mean, super loud. But then I can say, but I do have clients and they talk about how amazing I am. And I am in business because I do a good job. And there are plenty of people that do like me. And that person that didn't choose to hire me could have been a lot of reasons. Maybe it had nothing to do with me flubbing it. Maybe they couldn't finance it. Who knows? There are a lot of other things that could have happened. So I'm not saying counter it with arguments of, no, I am awesome. I am amazing. I am smart. No. Why do you think we're horrible? Where is that true? Where did that come from? That can be helpful.
Yeah.
But you have to
No, I
notice the words, not just the feelings.
Oh, right. And I will say that the book, The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, has been an absolutely eye opening experience in that regard. At least in terms of trying to figure out where these voices are coming from for me. And knowing that definitely helps a lot. But then you take those out and I don't know, like for me, it's still, there's a void there that needs to be filled with something else. And it's really hard to change that pattern inside my brain, right? That
Yes.
conditioning, that programming that's been there for so many years, to change that into
Yep.
something different, into something that I actually wanted to be,
Mm-hmm.
despite despite all the exercises and the affirmations and thinking more positively about things and even questioning my own thoughts, right? I know
Mm.
when I'm in my deepest throes of my depression, it's like standing in a corner with walls on both sides, and I know I'm in a corner, and I know there's a door there somewhere behind me. I just don't know how to turn myself around,
Don't have to turn
right?
around. Have you read the book Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma?
No, I have not. I've heard of it, but I've
It's
not
a
read it.
pretty academic. It's a very dense book, but it really does a good job of explaining this, recognizing the part of your brain and understanding that that part of your brain isn't you. It's dense, but it's a really good book.
Yeah. Do you have as a therapist, and although you're not licensed, right?
I'm
Uh,
not licensed, and I'm not licensed on purpose because my clients are mobile and global. And licensure, as you know, is only good if your clients are on the ground in the state in which you're licensed.
that's
The
right.
kind of jokey question I ask is, which license do I need for a client that's in an airplane?
Yeah.
And so I purposefully chose not to be licensed and did my work in business psychology and didn't get licensed so that I can work with people wherever they are. Maybe they're at their beach house or they're at a conference or whatever. I can talk to them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a brilliant move on your part, and you're right. The way the licensure is set up is really limiting sometimes.
It's
Trying
not
to
set
reach.
for today's world.
No, absolutely not. So I hope that that will change at some point. Although, at least in the U.S., each state loves to have control over its residents, and
Yep.
so I don't know if there ever will be a change. I mean, some of those restrictions, thankfully, were lapsed to some degree for the telehealth that came about during the COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But even that is simply not enough. I mean, if, just even in your example, right? Let's say you're in on the East Coast and you have a client on the West Coast or on an airplane, right? Somewhere, who knows, over the United States, who knows where, right? And the
They might be
states
over
are
the
flying,
Pacific Ocean. I have no
right?
idea.
Uh, you're telling me now that me, with my expertise, am not allowed to help that person because my licensure isn't valid in the location that they're at. It's
Right.
just so asinine. It's so stupid. But coming back to your clients, so
Hmm.
you are a therapist. You work sort of more a therapeutic coaching role, let's say.
Yeah, I do an
Um,
executive coach with that. We talk about personal life as well.
yeah, yeah. So who are those ideal clients, and what do you help them with?
Yeah, so my ideal clients are usually pretty successful human beings. They've done something, very well at some point or another, and something has gone sideways for them. And it could be sideways in a good way. They might be selling their business. Their business might be IPOing. They might be buying a new business. There could be positive things, but there are also negative things: getting divorced, death, health issues, business partner fraud. Like, something has happened where they're just like, man, I need somebody to talk to. And like I said at the beginning, they've probably gone to therapy or tried. It's hard. You probably know there's a limited number of therapists these days. It's hard to find a good therapist. So they might have tried therapy, but talking to someone who doesn't have any idea how business is run, especially if this is a C suite person, they're like, I talk a lot of words, but they don't understand me. They ask questions like, I don't know, what do you think you should do? That's not helpful. So clients come to me because they're in a situation where they're like, I need someone to talk to who I can bounce ideas off of, who can keep me honest, who isn't scared to tell me that's dumb. Why are you doing that? And who can also understand business. So leadership, communication, conflict resolution, all of the business things. Yes, let's talk about that. You're having an issue with your spouse? Yes, let's talk about that. So there's no TMI, no such thing as TMI when it comes to talking to me.
That's wonderful. And what you said too was good therapists are hard to find, right? I mean, on the one hand, there's a shortage of good, therapists and counselors of any qualification, but especially the good ones. And I think a big
Yeah.
problem with that, at least I see that coming from the medical world, is that
Yeah.
if you go to, not every therapist is the same, not every counselor is the same,
No.
not every doctor is the same. And especially if you're working with a system or for a larger entity, um, everything has to be labeled, right? You have this diagnosis, so we're going to do that. It's this cookie cutter approach
Yeah.
to medical care, which is really where the good therapists don't fit in, because, like you said, there are so many dimensions to each and every one of us that you can't really say, well, you're schizophrenic, so we're just going to talk about your, the hallucinations you're having. We're not going to talk about the fact that your brother is an alcoholic, right? We
Right.
can't do that, right?
Right.
In a system approach, where your time is limited and you only reimburse for whatever label you put onto the patient, you cannot jump outside those boundaries, which also
Right.
means you can't really help people because you can't go deep with them. You can't really get to the root cause of their problems.
Right.
And so I think that's absolutely right, that as a good therapist, as a good counselor, as a good coach, as a good human being, for God's sake, just as a
Right.
good human being, you cannot put labels on people. You cannot confine yourself. You really have to open the boundaries and see whatever comes about and then deal with that. But within the system approach, that's really not allowed. And that's been my own frustration with the medical system.
And then never mind that in the coaching, therapy, counseling world, it's a very deep pool full of very shallow people. So you're limited by the boundaries. And then on top of that, there's a lot of people who hang their shingle out as a coach who are terrible.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, but that goes pretty much for every profession. I mean, I've met plenty of doctors who are allowed to practice medicine who are absolute garbage, right?
It's so
This
scary.
despite years and years of training, despite all the licensing and all the exams that they've taken, they're still terrible physicians. So it's the same
Mm.
thing, really, in any specialties. I like your picture there of a deep pool with shallow people. I like that a lot. That's beautiful. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to use that in the future. That's
And I
awesome.
don't know about you, but it took me years to find my own person, my
Yeah.
coach
Oh yeah.
therapist
Yeah.
person, years and multiple tries and different people where I was like, nope, that's not it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. And you know, and I have to say that the best coach that I have ever worked with, unfortunately, quit. And so I am still looking for the one for me again, because that's really a relationship I wish I could still
Yeah.
nurture, but unfortunately, that's
Yeah.
not an option for me anymore. So it seems like no topics are necessarily off limits. You have very successful mostly executives, or are they professionals, or
Yeah,
who are
so it
these
it
people?
varies. It's, there's founders, there's funders, there's executives, there's professionals. I get athletes and celebrities sometimes. So I do get surgeons and lawyers. It really is more about the kind of person they are. They're, high potential, high charging, big, powerful personalities. And I've asked, a lot of them are men, just because that level there are more men than there are women. And I've asked them, before you had me to talk to, if something went sideways and you needed to talk to somebody, who were you talking to? And the answers I get are the trainer at the gym, the barber, they're a stripper, the taxi driver, the bartender. I'm like,
Yeah,
really? That's who these people are talking to? But
yeah.
I guess when hard times are hard, you talk to whoever's available.
No, that is so very true, which is why we have to make ourselves as available as we can
Yeah.
for really everyone, so that people
Yeah.
do have a safe space. And that's an important thing. I mean, I don't think people realize how um, I hate to use the word therapeutic here, but how beneficial having someone where you can have a safe space and you can really let the floodgates open and really talk about everything can be, right? Just the
Yeah.
fact alone that you're talking, that person does not have to offer any sort of advice or guidance at all. Just to be able to let go of your own thoughts and get them out of your head, that alone
Well, you know why?
is amazing.
I could tell you why. So
Go
your
for it.
brain has there's three parts, but we're only going to talk about two. We'll talk about the emotional brain and your logical brain. So your logical brain, your prefrontal cortex, that's the part that makes executive decisions. It has access to language, doesn't have access to feelings. Your emotional brain, that's the part of your brain that has feelings. It's your fight, flight, freeze. I can't talk. Like, that's the part of your brain that just has feelings, no access to language. So the two of them can't really talk. And so when you're in that anxiety, stress, rumination, like churning space, your logical brain is just like, we're not okay. I don't know what's wrong. I really can't explain it, but we are not okay. And your emotional brain is so busy freaking out that unless you kind of force it to say, hey, here's some feeling words, tell me what's going on with you, it doesn't tell you. And so, have you ever had a situation where you or a client have said something and then been like, that sounds really stupid out loud? It's
All the
because
time.
it's the first time your logical brain has gotten access to it. It's the
Yes.
first time your logical brain is like, that's what we're worried about.
Yes, all the time, all the time. There's, I've definitely noticed that if coming back even to the negative self talk, right? If I say things out loud, all of a sudden they sound really stupid, right? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why, right? Yeah, I would say all the time. And I think having then someone if you do it by yourself, that's obviously already a good thing. But if you do it with someone else and can guide the conversation into a better direction,
Yep.
maybe in a way or a place where you don't even know where it could be going, that can also be incredibly eye opening. Really getting a different perspective on things
And
can be so
noticing,
helpful. Yes, yes,
right? When someone else goes, wait, did you just say XYZ thing? And you go, wait, I did just say that. Do I believe that? Yeah, the
yeah,
noticing.
right, right. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, listen, I want to ask you some questions, more personal questions about you
Okay.
from my simple networking toolbook, just to paint a little bit more color on you. But before I do that, I do have to ask about the competitive beach volleyball, because that is such a unique experience that I have never heard of before. My my in my head, I got to tell you, what's playing right now is that segment from the Top Gun movie where they're playing volleyball on the beach. So,
Nice.
right?
Nice.
So now I have to know about this competitive beach volleyball thing before we get into a little bit different
Yeah.
questions here.
So when I got divorced the first time, I had been playing some pickup volleyball just as something to do. And I started playing some tournaments with, sixes and fours, grass, that kind of thing. And I played co-ed. I met this guy, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to go play some beach volleyball. I think you'd have fun." And I'm 26 at the time. And I said to him, "I think I'm too old to play beach volleyball."
Okay.
And he says, "No, you'll be fine. It'll be fun, whatever." So I'm like, okay. So we started playing just like tournaments, pickup games. I had a real job. I worked all week to pay the bills. And then we would work out in the evenings and, practice and whatnot. And then we would play tournaments Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, all day in the sand. I was in phenomenal shape. And, sometimes we won, sometimes we lost, but we had a great time. And
Yeah.
I do wonder if I had had the opportunity to start playing earlier and, had that kind of support system growing up, if I could have been better. Although, to be fair, for a beach volleyball player, I'm short. I'm only 5'9". So,
Well, it's still taller than me, so you got that going for you. That's
but yeah,
awesome.
it was so much fun.
All right. Well, I'm gonna keep playing Top Gun inside my head, but these questions come out of my Simple Networking Toolbook, which is a tool designed to help people network in a very different and unique way. It's like a friendship journal that we used to have, at least I used to have as a kid in elementary school. I still have mine. I just found it from like second and third grade.
Oh,
Where
wow.
people where your friends like answer questions about themselves, about who they want to be and what's their favorite color. But unlike the friendship journal, which your friends give back to you so you can give it to someone else, when someone fills out this book, they give it to someone else who gives it to someone else who gives it to someone else. So it goes
Oh,
down a chain of people that you would otherwise have no opportunity to meet at all.
how
So
interesting.
the first question I want to ask you actually is going to be in the second edition. It's not in the current print version. But you said you lived in California, North Carolina. You mentioned England. So throughout of all of these experiences, these global experiences, what is a food that you like to eat that other people may find odd?
So you remember I told you I used to be anorexic? Food is really hard for me. Um, Food that I eat that other people might find odd. Well, the thing that people are going to find most odd about me is now, having grown up on a beef ranch in California, I'm actually plant based. And so
Okay.
a lot of the food that I make from scratch. I make with and I love eggplant, just eggplant, like roasted with maybe some tomatoes, some potatoes. I actually have some. My neighbor gave me some. Eggplant is a big thing I like to eat. And not because it's like, oh, that's an amazing food, but it's just really good. And my friends will tell you I eat oatmeal all the freaking time.
you know, I definitely find eggplant odd. I've had it a few times, and I've just never found it to be tasty for me.
I
So
think a
I
lot of
totally get that.
because my palate has changed so much since my husband and I went plant based, that I think
Yeah,
there was a lot of things that you might think that's odd, but if you came over and I made it for you, you'd be like, that's really good.
I
So
maybe
come
that's
over,
quite
I'll feed you
possible.
plants.
Yes, no, and just on the topic of the plant based diet, I mean the data by and large shows that plant based diets are better for you. Um,
Mhm.
I'm not here to discount that there isn't benefits to eating meats and animal products, because we're all unique and different. You know what your needs are for your body may be different than my needs are for my body. But at least on a global perspective, if you look at all the data, plant based foods are healthier with fewer
Yep.
health related complications down the road. So
And they're good
I
for the
applaud you for that.
environment.
No, absolutely. No, I
And you're
applaud
not
you for that.
killing other
That's awesome.
creatures, which is nice too. People
Well,
are
you see,
all up in arms about people eating pets. Well, you eat other things you don't consider pets, but
yes. Well, you're still killing carrot plants.
yeah.
All right. The next question is kind of in line with all the discussion we had today, but I want to dive just a little bit deeper, maybe, and that is who or what is your source of inspiration?
My inspiration comes from everything I've come through and who I could have been, that person that could have been high on whatever drugs, rocking in the corner of a dirty trailer park somewhere,
Yeah.
and the fact that I didn't become that. I think I don't know. This is the weird way to say it, but owe the world to use my brain and help other people because I came through that much. And so I have to remind myself sometimes where I'm like, I haven't done enough. I should be more. I should be more successful. Why am I not? Robyn, you've come a long way. You started from a really different place. And that for me is inspiring, which is weird
Yeah.
to say I inspire myself. I know, I'm sorry.
No, I think it goes very much with what we said earlier, that motivation comes from a future self. And in your case, it's not just one future self, but it's all the other options that could have been your future
Could have
self.
been.
So I
Yeah.
think that's very much in line with what we already discussed. And so I think that that makes perfect sense. At least it makes perfect sense inside my head, which isn't always the best
Well, hey, we'll
place for
take that
things
as
to
a
make
win right
sense.
now because I'm
So
talking to
yes,
you.
absolutely. All right. This next question is the oddest question I've always asked, which is why I keep asking it, because it's just such a
Oh,
fun
no.
question. Would you rather have a dog that meows or a cat that barks?
Well, I have a dog that does circus tricks. And I train her to do circus tricks. And I absolutely love that about her, that I can train her to do circus tricks. So while I've owned cats, I am a little bit allergic to them. I think I would rather have a dog that meows because even like a Basenji, which doesn't bark, makes that weird yodeling noise.
Yeah,
I think they're not super trainable, but they're still more trainable than a cat. Cats are hard to train. I've done it. They're hard.
they are. They are. They have a mind of their own. That's just what it is. All right.
Mm-hmm.
This next question comes to you from the previous guest, because every guest has the opportunity to ask the next guest a question, not who that person is, what we're talking about, or what they do in life.
Oh,
So
goodness.
this question comes to you from Coach Lee Hopkins. And, I have to say, Robyn, every single time these questions get passed forward to the next guest, they seem to be asked to the most appropriate person that question could be asked to.
Hmm.
I don't know how that works out, but the question is, what relationship do you cherish the most?
Oh, the relationship with my husband, far and away, no questions asked. I am married to the absolute perfect partner for me now. He's a former competitive bodybuilder and trainer on the Mr. Olympia tour. He is slow to anger. He is quick to laugh. He's creative. He's funny, and he's an amazing partner for me.
That's beautiful. I love that for you. That's amazing.
It took me a
Well,
long
look,
time to get here. I had to ask him out 4 times because he's clueless. Love him to death, but oh my goodness. But yeah, he's a
uh,
good guy.
that's good. That's awesome. That's fantastic. I love that. Well, listen, it's your turn to pass it forward. So, what question would you like to ask the next guest, not knowing who that person is, what we're going to be talking about, or what they do in life?
My favorite question to ask is, what would you like to be different?
Just in general, what would
It
you
could be
like?
about work, it could be about their life, it could be about the world, it could be about I don't care. Tell me what you'd like to be different.
All right, fair enough.
And then what would different look like?
Right, right, exactly. Absolutely. So I got that written down. I'll be sure to ask the next guest, whoever
Yay, I
that may
can't wait
be.
to hear what they say.
I know, right? Awesome. Well, listen, this has been a stellar conversation. How can people reach out to you? How can they connect? How can they find you and work with you if they so desire?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, obviously, Dr. Robyn Odegaard on LinkedIn. My website is mentalmacgyver.com, and I know MacGyver can be hard to spell, but trust me, you can if you Google it, I will come up. You can find me mentalmacgyver.com. I also have a YouTube channel which is at Dr. Robyn, and that's Robyn with a Y. So
Awesome.
reach out, book a hello conversation, send me an email. Would love to chat.
That's fantastic. I'll be sure to leave all those links in the description below so people can just click on it and connect more readily with you. Any final last words from you to the world today?
The thing I would like to remind people is it's okay to burn hot. It's okay to burn fast. You don't have to burn out. That's a choice. So thank you
Ooh,
so
I
much,
like that.
Dr. Felix. I appreciate it.
Wait, so it's okay to burn hot. It's okay to
Burn
burn
hot, burn
fast.
fast. Don't burn out. That's a
I
choice.
love that. That is so good. Man, I wish I had come up with that.
It's on my website, mentalmacgyver.com. Burn hot, burn fast, don't burn out.
That's awesome. I truly love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. Loved having it with you. And you enjoy the rest of your day.
It's always a pleasure, Felix. Thank you.